Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Wednesday night shiur. I'd like to dedicate the shiur tonight Le'ilun Nishmat, one of my rabbis, Harav Aharon Volkan, Ruach Adonai Tenichenu B'Gan Eden. Also for Le'ilun Nishmat Shemaya ben Adina, Ruach Adonai Tenichenu B'Gan Eden. Also Le'ilun Nishmat Ruth Bat Rachel, Ruach Adonai Tenichena B'Gan Eden. להבדיל בין המתים לחיים, רפואה שלמה פשבע בן חתון חנה, אל נרפנה לו, אל נרפנה לו, אל נרפנה לו. Also for Reuven ben Hatun Hana, El Narafana Lo, El Narafana Lo, El Narafana Lo. And also Refuah Shema for David Binyamin ben Dova Fega, El Narafana Lo, El Narafana Lo, El Narafana Lo. And I'd like to also wish a Refuah Shema for all of those people who've been affected by the coronavirus. May they have a rapid recovery and a complete recovery. El Narafana Lahem, El Narafana Lahem, El Narafana Lahem. In the Zchut of the Torah we're going to learn tonight. Okay, so we're going to discuss a little bit from Parashat Aharemot, which we're going to be reading this Shabbat. We're actually going to be reading two parashot this Shabbat, Aharemot and Parashat Kedoshim. There's a lot of mitzvot in Aharemot and even more in Kedoshim. So what I want to focus on one aspect of the parasha in the beginning and see if we can have some understanding of what would be the response to different tragic events. Obviously, we're looking right now at what's going on in the world, and there's a lot of tragic events, especially for the Jewish people. Lo aleinu, lo alechem. There's many of our brothers and sisters, great rabbis, scholars, tzaddikim, and our regular people as well who've been affected by this virus, and many have succumbed to the illness. We don't even know the full extent of it yet because we still haven't, heard. I'm sure when we all go back to Batei Knesset, Be'ezrat Hashem, in the near future, we're going to see lots of people saying Kaddish, unfortunately, because there's a lot of people who have lost parents and grandparents. So we have to understand what is the Torah's response when there's tragedies that happen. How are we supposed to look at it? And what I'd like to look is three different events. Two of them are mentioned in the Torah. One of them is from a Talmudic passage discussing an event that happened, of course, another tragic event, and see the different responses that we see based on these Pesukim. So if we go to the first page of the sheets that I sent you, it says over here, in the beginning of Parashat Aharemot, it says, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe, Aharemot shene bnei Aharon, bekorvatam lifnei Adonai, vayamutu. Translated, and God spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aharon, when they came close before God and they died. So, of course, this is referring to what happened 3 parashot ago in Parashat Shemini, with the tragedy that happened with the deaths of Aharon's 2 older sons, Nadav and Avihu. And it says over here, right afterwards, the Pesukim continue, after it's telling what happened to them, then it continues on and says, Vayomer Adonai Moshe daber Aharon achicha, ואל יבוא בכל עת אל הקודש מבית לפרוכת אל פני הכפורת אשר על הארון ולא ימות כי בענן אלא אל הכפורת. And we see a warning. Moshe Rabbeinu God gives Moshe to tell a warning to Aharon, and the warning is that he's not supposed to come anytime he wants, anytime available, to come to the Kodesh, Kodesh Kedoshim, in front of the cover that is upon the ark. Why? Lest he die. For I appear, as it says in the Pasuk, in the cloud over the cover. So we see that there's a certain level of distance that even Aharon, who was a tremendous tzaddik and very, very close to God, beloved to Hashem because he loved everyone, he was Ohev Shalom, V'rodef Shalom, U'mukaravan the Torah. Nevertheless, Aharon HaKohen was not permitted to go at any time into the Kodesh HaKodashim. And it specifically, this parasha Haremot tells us when and when the circumstances is Aharon allowed to go into the Kodesh Kodashim. And of course, there's only one time a year, at one particular time of the day, and one individual. And his name is the Kohen Gadol, Aharon over here, and then of course in the generations afterwards, other Kohanim. that are allowed to go into the Kodesh Kodashim on one day, which is Yom Kippurim. And this is the exact parasha that we read on Yom Kippurim. In the morning, Shacharit, we read Aharon, the beginning part of the parasha. And then in the afternoon, for Mincha, we read the subsequent part of the parasha, which deals with the Arayot and all the forbidden relations. And then in Pasuk number 3, it says, Bezot yavo Aharon el HaKodesh, befar ben bakar lehatat v'ayi leolah. And it gives certain korbanot sacrifices that Aharon has to bring before, which almost as a prerequisite for him coming into the Kodesh. And he has to bring a ben bakar. He has to bring a cow, a female cow, ben bakar, lechatat, for a sin offering, the ayil leolah. And he has to bring an ayil, which is a male ram, to there's only one kind of ram, is it? Male, for olah, for olah, which is another type of sacrifice that's to go to Hashem. So we see these two aspects have to be brought, and other things as well. And this is the whole thing that we understand of how Aharon comes into the Kodesh and does the special avodah that we know what's called the Seder HaAvodah in Yom Kippurim, which of course we read about it in Musaf and Bezat Hashem. If the Bet HaMikdash is built, maybe it'll be built on before Kippur comes, and we'll actually get to see this actually happen, Be'ezrat Hashem. But if it doesn't get built in that time, we'll be able to read about Seder Avodah, and this is what's discussed over here. So I want to look and analyze what happened with the sons of Aharon. Obviously this is a tragedy, Acharei Mot, it's the death, and not just death of anyone, two tremendous Kohanim who are going to potentially lead what their lives could have been had they not died here is tremendous. So we have to go back and see. Let's see what it says over here. If we bring the Ramban, and Ramban, when he talks over here, is what does it mean, Bezot Yavo Aharon el HaKodesh? What does it mean, Bezot, with this? And in Hebrew, there's two words for this. One is the masculine, and one is the feminine. The masculine word for this is zeh, and the feminine word for this is zot. And we see the pasuk specifically says, Bezot yavo Aharon el HaKodesh. With this, which was something that is feminine. And so Ramban continues and says, Kesod zot ot habrit asher kimoti. Meaning, he says from a sod point of view, and he brings a bunch of pisukim over here that also talk about the concept of zot. And these are the things Aharon has to come before he's close to the Kodesh. And these are things that any Jew has to potentially have with them before they approach the Kodesh. So he brings over here, Zot ota brita asher kimoti. This is the sign of the covenant that I gave with Noach. Zot ota brita asher kimoti. This is the sign of the covenant which Hashem made with Noach, which was the rainbow, and that was the brit, and was the deal. A brit is a contract or a deal, and basically there's a deal that God made with the world. He's not going to destroy the world with a flood again. That's the concept of the rainbow. Ukva perashtiv, and the Ramban continues on. I already explained this in Shmot and Lamed Aleph Yud Gimel. V'Rabotenu ramzu bo amru, and Rabotenu ramzu bo, and the rabbis hinted about this. Amru b'Vayikra Rabbah, and the Ramban quotes from Vayikra Rabbah, which is the Midrash, which basically says, Rabbi Yudan patar Kara'i b'kohen gadol b'chnisato levet kodshei hakodashim havilot shel mitzvot biyado. Which means Rabbi Yudan basically said that when the Kohen Gadol comes into the Kodesh Kodashim, he comes with him chavilot shel mitzvot, bundles and bundles of mitzvot, biyado, in his hands. Bizchut Torah, which are the mitzvot that he comes with? And of course, him, not personally necessarily, but representing the Jewish people as well. So what he comes, we see Vizot Torah, because there's a pasuk in the Torah that says Vizot Torah Shesam Moshe. Vizot Torah. So the person, before coming to Hashem, close to Hashem, you have to have Torah. B'zchut Milah, and it is the zchut of the Milah. Zot Briti Asher Tishmeru. This is the brit, this is my covenant, Asher, that you shall follow, Toshmora, that you will follow. Which means what? This is the brit, which means the brit milah, or the covenant, yes? Continuing on, B'zchut Shabbat. In the zchut of Shabbat, as it says in Yishaya, Ashre Enosh Ya'aseh Zot. And that pasuk specifically, if you look in Yishaya, in chapter 56, verse number 2, is talking about Shabbat. Continuing on, B'zchut Yerushalayim. Why in the Zchut of Yerushalayim? Zot Yerushalayim. From Yehezkel, chapter 5, verse number 5. Zot Yerushalayim. Bizchut Shvatim. In the Zchut, in the merit of the Shvatim. Because it says, V'zot asher diber lahem avihem. Which means we see that the Shvatim were referred to as Zot. Continuing on, Bizchut Yehuda. Not just all the Shvatim, that's one, but also in the Zchut of Yehuda. Because the pasuk that says, V'zot leYehuda. This is Zot HaBracha. Bizchut Knesset Yisrael, in the Zchut of the Jewish people, or the Knesset Yisrael, the congregation of the Jewish people, because there's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim that says, Zot komatech dameta letamar, and there it's talking about the Jewish people. Bizchut HaTerumah, in the merit of the Trumah offering, V'zot HaTerumah, because again, V'zot. And then continuing on, Bizchut HaMa'asrot, in the merit of the Ma'asrot, Ubahanuni naz bezot. Again, Malachi over here is talking about the Terumah. Bizchut HaKorbanot, in the merit of the sacrifices. Bezot yavo Aharon. With this, Aharon comes, specifically the sacrifices. And the Rambam says there's a longer explanation for all this, and I've already explained everything I need to explain. Hopefully by the end of the class we'll have a better idea of what the Ramban is talking about. If you don't understand yet, that's okay. Well, let's develop this. But we see there are multiple things that over here are hinted to in the word Zot, which is once again the feminine Hebrew of this. So if we look to Parashat Shemini, where we see the tragedy of Aharon's son specifically written, let's see the context of how things were working over there. So if you open up to Vayikra, chapter 9, verse number 22, if you look in the sheets, it's right there. It says over here on page number 3, Vayisa Aharon et yado el ha'am vayivarechem vayered me'asot ha'chatat ve'ha'olah ve'ashlamim. And Aharon lifted his hands toward the people and gave them a bracha, the concept of the Birkat Kohanim, yes. And he stepped down after offering the sin offering. He made the Korban Chatat, and the burnt offering, the Olah, and the offering of well-being, which means Shmini, Parashat Shmini, is discussing what was probably one of the happiest days in Aharon's life. It was the day that he became the Kohen Gadol, that the Mishkan was inaugurated. Moshe Rabbeinu spent the first 7 days of Nisan in the second year that they were in the desert. The first year they were coming out of Egypt during Nisan. In the second year, it was 7 days. Moshe Rabbeinu showed Aharon and his sons how to do the work in the Mishkan after completing building it. And if you remember how Parashat Shmot ends off, there was a tremendous kavod that when they finished building the Mishkan, there was such a kavod that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't come. And then Sefer Vayikra starts Vayikra Moshe with a small aleph, come, which means Moshe had to come because he also was stepping back because of the kavod of Hashem. So we see this as a tremendous ability for us to have this relationship with God, Melech Malchei HaMlachim, the King of all kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. It's a tremendous level that we're in, and we have to prepare ourselves to have that relationship. So Aharon on Vayom HaShemini, what is Yom HaShemini? The Shemini of Nisan, the 8th day of the Miluim, which was the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was no longer going to be functioning as the Kohen, and Aharon and his sons were going to take over and be the Kohanim from this point and the rest of Jewish history. So this is a very happy day for Aharon, and because he was so happy, he gave a bracha to the people, which is why we see this as Sephardic custom, and I think amongst the Hasidim as well, that in situations where people are very, very happy, like at a wedding or like at a Brit Milah, the Sandak and the Mohel and the Baal Habrit, the father, give brachot to people. Why? Because when a person is so filled with simha, they're able to share. It's almost like that simha is a hashpa'ah or a direct influence from Shamayim. It brings tremendous shefa, brings tremendous abundance from the Shamayim. And then what this person is then doing is sharing that shefa or giving some of it over without losing any yourself, because the wonderful thing about shefa is that it's like fire. When you take a fire and you loan it to somebody, you don't lose anything. That person gets it. So if you take a candle and someone needs fire, you light a candle from a candle, the one giving gives everything the person has exactly the same as what he had, yet the person giving loses nothing. This is the concept of shefa min hashamayim. So a person who's in this level of happiness, a simcha, is able to give from that shefa that he's receiving from Hashem, that's allowing to him to have that happiness over to others through the concept of a bracha. So we see this is a tremendous happy day for Aharon. And it continues on in the next pasuk in verse number 23. Vayavo Moshe ve'Aaron et lo emoed vayetzu vayivarechu et ha'am vayerach hevod Adonai el kol ha'am. And Moshe and Aaron came to the Ohel Moed, and then they came out, right? And they blessed the nation, yes, both of them, and they saw the presence of Hashem appear to all the people, which means even though they had made the Chet HaEgel, they made the tremendous sin which caused a sort of delay or a little bit of a damage or a significant amount of damage to the relationship the Chet HaEgel did. Nevertheless, the completion of the Mishkan was going to be the repair of that tremendous damage that was done to the relationship between Bnei Yisrael and Hashem. And this was exemplified over here. And then it continues on in pasuk number 24. Vatetze esh milifnei Adonai, vatochal ala mizbeach et ha'olah ve'et ha'halavim, vayar kol ha'am vayaronu, vayipelu al pneihem. Translated, and a fire came forth from before the Lord, milifnei Hashem, let's leave that alone what that exactly means, and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar, which means this was the sign to all the people that God accepted this sacrifice, despite the fact that they made the Chet HaEgel, they made the sin of the golden calf. Nevertheless, the sacrifice was accepted. And if you remember the beginning of Parashat Shmini, Aharon didn't want to come because God said you have to bring a par. What do you mean a par? I made a mistake with the Egel. The par is the mother, yes? Anyway, let's leave that alone for now. And we see the language saying over here that there was this tremendous kavod that was there. They witnessed this kavod. God accepted the sacrifice, which means he accepted the prayer. He accepted the avodah. And then the entire people were vayaronu, which here says shouted. Vayaronu also means they were very happy. They were ecstatic. It's a very high level of happiness. It's called rina. And they were very happy because it looked like everything was going great. Vayipelu al pneihem, and they fell on their faces, which is a type of bowing. It's called it's what we do on Kippur when we fall on our face, nefilat apayim, all the way to the floor, which means this is unbelievable happiness. Now we get to the tragedy. Continuing on in the next pasuk, right after, it says over here, Vayihu b'nei Aaron Nadav va'avihu ish mahtato vayitinu bahen esh vayasimu alea ketoret vayakrivu lifnei Adonai esh zara asher lo tziva otam. And then it says, now Aharon's sons Nadav and Avihu, Aaron had 4 sons, these are the 2 older ones. They took a fire pan, which is sort of like a shovel. They put fire in it, and they put incense on it, and they brought this offering before Hashem, which the Torah calls Esh Zara, a strange fire, translated literally. And this was not what was commanded. That's what the pasuk says, which means they did something, shall we say, on their own. They did something individually. Next pasuk. Vatetze esh milifnei Adonai vatochal otam vayamutu lifnei Adonai. The exact same lashon, the same Hebrew, vatetze esh milifnei Adonai vatochal ala mizbeach. That was talking about how God accepted the sacrifice that Aharon and all of Bnei Yisrael brought, repairing the relationship that happened between the Jewish people and God by the Chet HaEgel, and everybody's all ecstatic and happy, and it says Vayaronu. And then over here, these two young men, they make a mistake, or seemingly a mistake, and what happens? The exact same Hebrew words, it's hard to appreciate in English, exactly the same, Vatetze esh milifnei Hashem vatochal otam. And a fire came the same way the fire came to accept the sacrifices that were brought to repair the relationship between God and the Jewish people. This same fire came and basically took 2 other sacrifices, which were Nadav and Avihu. Vayamutu lifnei Hashem, and they died lifnei Hashem. Whenever the Torah says lifnei Hashem, it's saying they died in the Ohel Moed. They're very much there. Wow. Imagine being Aharon. Okay, the Jewish people themselves, it's a terrible thing, it's a tragedy, they saw the tragedy, but it's not family. Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, this is his nephew, it's terrible, 2 nephews. Aharon, the level of happiness that he had, that he gave the people a bracha, and he realized that God forgave him for the sin of the golden calf that he participated with by making the calf according to some, or by not stopping them from doing it, all these different things, I'm not going to get into that now. And then he loses his 2 sons. Tragedy. Tremendous tragedy. And then Moshe Rabbeinu sees what happens, and what does he do? Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, Hu asher diber Adonai le'emor bikrovai ekadesh ve'al pnei kol ha'am ekaved vayidom Aharon. And Moshe said to Aharon, this is what Hashem meant when he said, through those that are near me, I show myself holy and gain kavod, glory before all the people. And Aharon was silent. We'll talk about this a little bit more, Be'ezrat Hashem, as we get further on in the shiur today. But first I want to say, what was Aharon's response to the tragedy? How did he respond to this tremendously tragic event? So we have to understand, what does the word Vayidom mean? So if we look at Rashi, and we'll start with Rashi before we go anywhere else a little later on, Rashi says he was silent. What does it mean he was silent? When a person sees a tragedy, what is the first reaction? Of course, to cry, to be upset, to scream out, but to complain. Oh, why me? Why did God do this to me? Why did God do this to us at all? Where is he? How could he do this? All of these questions. And we see Aharon's response, despite the fact that Aharon was wonderful in making shalom between people, and he had tremendous ahavat Yisrael, when he was faced with this tremendous tragedy, he's quiet. He doesn't, if you look at Rashi, he was quiet, he doesn't cry, and he doesn't complain. So we see one of the responses to tragedy we learn from this parasha is, if you don't have something nice to say, keep your mouth shut. If you want to say complaints against God, the best thing to do is keep your mouth shut. Okay? So from Aharon we're learning what? The best response to a tragic situation is to be quiet. I want to compare that to another tragedy. Not exactly the same level of tragedy, but maybe also very tragic. So if we go to Parashat Chayei Sarah in Bereshit, it says over there that Sarah died. Now, okay, she was an old woman. She was 127 years old. But Aharon lived till Avraham lived till 175. So vis-a-vis Avraham, Sarah died very young. 50 years, that's a long time to be without her, yes? And it says over here, Tamot Sarah bekiryat arba hi Hebron, be'eretz Canaan, vayavo Avraham lispod leSarah v'liv kota. And it says over here that Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, the place called Kiryat Arba, which is also Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Vayavo Avraham. Avraham, of course, was coming from where? He was coming from Akedat Yitzchak. He was coming from what was arguably the greatest challenge of his life, to be told to sacrifice his son, to bring him up for Olah. And when he was told then not to sacrifice his son, what happened? There was a replacement, which was an ayil. There was an ayil there that was brought as a replacement for Yitzchak. Avraham did not have to kill Yitzchak, and that must have brought a tremendous amount of happiness to Avraham Avinu. First of all, that he was able to withstand the test, that he showed God his devotion even to something that he loves as his son, and then God rewarded that devotion and that willingness to sacrifice something so important to him by doing what? By giving him the closeness through the sacrifice, through a korban that was brought at the Har HaMoriah. Avraham comes back and he finds his wife is dead. And that's why it says, Vayavo Avraham lispod leSarah. Of course, he eulogized her. It's a mitzvah to eulogize. Aharon could not do that, but that's a separate issue because he's the Kohen Gadol. We'll leave that alone. But Avraham Avinu is going to eulogize Hesped. He's going to eulogize his wife, Veliv Kota, and to cry for her. Now, it's very interesting. If you look at a Sefer Torah, and you look at the word Velif Kota in a Sefer Torah, the kaf of that word is small, which means one of the letters of that word is small. And generally there's always a reason, or many reasons, why sometimes letters are big, sometimes letters are small. And if a person wants to know where to look for reasons why letters are big or small, one of the best places to look is the Baal HaTurim, the author of the Tur, the Baal HaTurim. And it says over here, the son of Rabbeinu Asher, says over here, what does it mean lifkota? The Baal HaTurim says, this is page number 6 out of the 21 I sent you. Kaf ketana. It's a small kaf. It's a small kaf. Why is it a small kaf? Shelo bacha ela me'at. He didn't cry that much. He only cried a little bit. Okay, it's a small kaf. He didn't cry too much. Wow. Why? He didn't love Sarah? What kind of thing? Of course he cried a little bit, but he didn't cry too much. Why not? Lefishes zekenaita. First it says because she was old. I'm not crazy about that reason. Inameh, another answer. Shahaita kemo goremet mitata. Because why? Baal Turim is referring to something else here. Is referring to the fact that Abraham caused her death in another way. What the Baal Turim is saying over here is that when Abraham did not chastise Hagar when she became pregnant. It says that Hagar, when she became pregnant, she started to walk around as a big shot. And Abraham didn't do anything. And because he didn't do anything, Sarah went to him and said, Yishpot Adonai beni ubenecha. May God judge between me and you. Because Abraham didn't say anything, and he should have said something, he didn't. And Sarah basically said, may God judge between you and me. Meaning what? She called for judgment on her husband, Abraham. And it says in the Gemara, if a person, a Jew, calls for judgment on another Jew, the judgment comes to them first. Which means if a person's going to call for judgment on a fellow Jew, the first place they look is your deeds to see how they are. You're calling judgment on somebody else? Okay, that means you want God to operate in a justice type of way. Let's see how you behave. You don't behave so well. And that's why Sarah died early. That's what says Midrash. So over here it says, Avraham Avinu was goremet mitata, because by not acting in that situation with Hagar, he caused there to be Mesirat Din on Sarah, and that's why she died early. Valkenne and Shah, and that's why she died. He Techila, she died first. Vehamebed, that's Moladat en Mespidinoto. And he says over here, and someone who commits like suicide, Me'abed, that's Moladat, because she did that, we don't hesped her. We don't do hesped. Anyway, other people say a little differently. Other people say, what does it mean he cried a little bit? Based on what the beginning part. Why did she die? She died because that Avraham went to sacrifice Yitzchak, which means he went to do a mitzvah. He comes back and he saw the effect of that mitzvah, or the side effect of that mitzvah, is the death of his wife. Now, of course, he has to cry for her, because the Talmud says a person who doesn't cry for a person who's kasher is not a good situation. We have an obligation to cry for someone who is a kosher person, and this is his wife. This is his assistant his whole life. Of course, he has to cry for her, but he doesn't want to look like he's crying too much for her. Why? Because that could potentially look like he's complaining against God. Look at this. I took Isaac to be sacrificed. I followed your directions, and look at the results of this. How could you do this to me? So he didn't want to appear that he was crying too much, so that he shouldn't look like he's complaining against God. So here we see this is a little different. Aharon was quiet completely, and we'll see the Ramban says he cried initially and then he became quiet. So he stopped crying. Why? Because if a person cries too much, it looks like it's complaining. And over here, Avraham Avinu was obligated to cry for his wife, but he doesn't cry. Why doesn't he cry? Because he doesn't want to show that he didn't fulfill the mitzvah in a full amount, that he regrets, chas v'shalom, doing the mitzvah. Because it also says, amongst the rabbis, that a person who does a good deed and then regrets doing the good deed, you lose the credit for the good deeds. A person could lose the schar of good deeds. How? By regretting that they did it. So Avraham didn't want to show he was regretting it, even though it was a tremendous tragedy for him. So he cried, but cried a little. So from Avraham Avinu we learn that, of course, you don't complain. And if you're going to cry, it should never look like the crying is in any way, shape, or form a complaining against God for the details of whatever happened. Skip 2 pages, go to page number 9. It says over here, Vayidom Aharon. I said there's another explanation. Rashi says that he was quiet, which means he didn't cry, he didn't do anything. The Ramban, quoting from a pasuk in Echa, basically says the word Vayidom doesn't mean just be quiet. It can mean be quiet, but it can domu sela, be quiet like a rock. But domu can also mean be still, which means if you think about it, that's also quiet, when a person's still and quiet. So be still, which means what? It doesn't mean that he wasn't crying first, the Ramban says. No, he was crying because his sons died. But when Moshe Rabbeinu said what he said, then he stopped crying. Vayidom Aharon, which means initially his response was to cry. And then what did Moshe do? He gave Aharon a reason. He explained to Aharon what? This was min hashamayim, and there was a reason for it. And that was enough to quiet Aharon, so he stopped crying, so he was still. So we see once again, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to give a reason. He's a prophet. But we have to avoid complaining when there's tragic events that are happening. And be very, very cautious not to damage our relationship with God when bad things happen. Because when bad things happen, this is an opportunity to actually show how much we love Hashem by accepting them with quiet. And that's the whole concept. When a person, lo aleinu, lo alechem, has somebody pass away, there's something that's done called tziduk hadin. So it shouldn't happen to anybody. What does tziduk hadin mean? The fact that the person is accepting the judgment upon themselves from Shamayim, that it came from Hashem, and even though it's very hard for a person to realize this, it's a good thing, even though we don't understand it at that particular time, and we may not even feel it that way, but we have to accept the fact that it's for the best. And that's why we make a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam dayan ha'emet, which means blessed is God, he's the true judge. Which means since he's the true judge, it's not a fake judge like a judge of Basar Vadam that might not be able to understand everything and missing a certain factors, and therefore his judgment is not so good. God sees everything, and if the person was destined to die at that particular time, then it's mina shamayim, and hakol is for tov, everything is for good, even though we don't understand it. This is an attitude, this is a whole philosophy of how a person goes through life, that even if there are difficult things that are happening, a person, if he can find a reason for himself that makes himself better, changes who he is, and makes things better, that's great. But if a person can't find a reason, then we have to understand everything that comes from Shamayim is for good. And even though we don't understand it and we don't feel it, the bottom line is we have to allow sometimes our brain to overrun our heart and not let the heart get away with feeling things that are improper. So we see this is what we learned from Aharon. And this is the pasuk from Echa. If you go to page number 11, Tzak libam el Adonai homat bat Zion horidi kanachal dimah yomam v'layla al titeni fugat lach al tidom bat enech. This is their heart cried out to Hashem. O wall of fair Zion, shed tears like a torrent day and night. Give yourself no respite, your eyes no rest. So from here, al tidom, which means don't rest. Don't allow your eyes to rest, which means that they should be crying and crying and crying. So vayidom means not to cry. This is where the Ramban learns, and of course this is talking about mourning for the Bet HaMikdash. And a person in Echa, when it's Tisha B'Av, is obligated to mourn for the Bet HaMikdash. And those who mourn for the Bet HaMikdash on Tisha B'Av will have the zechut to be able to see it in its building. That's what it says in the Gemara in Masechet Ta'anit. On that subject, we have a very, very famous Gemara. It's mentioned in multiple areas in the Talmud. This here is from the end of Masechet Makot. And here it's talking about the attitudes of different rabbis or different people towards the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. So beginning over here, I want to see which rabbis is this talking about. So it says over here, Ukvar Haya, and it was once happened, Kvar Haya, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva, Malchin Baderech. That these rabbis, Rabban Gamliel, who was the head of the generation, the most important rabbi of his generation, Elazar ben Azariah, another one of the greats. He's the one who was the Av Bet Din, if you remember the whole situation where Elazar ben Azariah deposed Rabban Gamliel because he was an attitude. We'll leave that alone for now. There was a situation that happened there. Tremendous. This is the number one, the number two. Rabbi Yoshua, arguably maybe number three. And Rabbi Akiva, okay, the number four guy. Me'alchim b'derech, they're walking on the way. V'sham'u kol hamona shel Romi. And they heard the voice of the Roman Empire. They're walking along the road and they heard the sound of the multitudes of Rome. Mipalata, from a place called Petioli. Me'av esrim mil, 120 mil, which is a tremendous distance. V'itchil, 120 kilometers, basically. A voice from that far away of people, that's tremendous. V'itchilu bochin. And the first three rabbis, which is Rabban Gamliel, the lead of the generation, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Yoshua, were crying. Rabbi Akiva misahek. And Rabbi Akiva was laughing. He was happy. Amrulo, they said to him, Mipnei ma ata misahek. Rabbi Akiva, why are you happy? You're hearing all these Roman legions and all these things. Of course, this is during the Hadrianic persecutions. This is a tremendous difficult time for the Jewish people. So they were crying because they heard these multitudes and they understood that these were potentially going to cause a lot of problems for the Jewish people. The Romans are not there to have a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. So continuing on, so this is what they asked Rabbi Akiva. Why are you happy? The fact that they're crying is the normal response to seeing something like that. So Amar lahem, Rabbi Akiva, being a good Jew, is going to answer a question with a question. Vatem, and you? Mipnei ma atam bochim. Why are you crying? Crazy. They're asking him a logical question. Why are you laughing? He turns it around and says, I don't understand. Why are you crying? So, of course, they're going to answer. Amurlo, they said to him, Halalu kushiim shemishtachavim la'asavim umkaterim la'avodat kochavim. These are Gentiles. Again, it says Kushiim. It doesn't really mean Kushiim. It means Gentiles. This is probably an area of the Gemara that was censored. These are Goyim. And they are bowing down to the trees and they make incense to idol worship, which means they're worshiping Avodah Zarah. Yoshvin Betach. They are sitting around happy as a clam, as we would say. Vashket, and quiet, which means they're in charge. They're ruling everybody. V'anu, and us, Bet Hadom Raglai, the place of God's feet, that's what Bet HaMikdash is called, Bait Hadom Raglai. What kind of house is a place for God to rest his feet, shall we say, yes? Bet Hadom Raglai Elokeinu, it's the place of the footstool of God, our God. Saruf Ba'esh, it's burned in fire, which means they were walking and they saw the Bet HaMikdash, or they thought about the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. And we're not going to cry? How does this make sense? Which means they're recognizing that they're in a difficult situation. The Goyim are on top, the Jewish people are down, and they're crying about that. Amar lahen, he said to them, Lekach ani metzachek. This is why I'm happy. This is why I'm laughing. This is why I'm smiling. Malo v'rei retzono kach. How much of people who are worshiping Avodah Zarah, people who are not behaving properly, people who are evil, are doing well, how much more so is God going to reward those that are doing the will of Hashem? Not necessarily in this world, in the next world, but nevertheless, Rabbi Akiva had this perspective, tremendous perspective, that even though he saw a tragic situation in Olam Hazeh, as we see here, nevertheless, he was able to understand that that's only what I'm seeing now, but really, there's a lot of simcha there, because why? If this is how it is for them, and God makes it peaceful for them, how much more so is he going to make it for peaceful people who do his will, maybe not in this world, but the world to come. That's Rabbi Akiva. Continuing on in the Gemara, and this is precisely why I brought this Gemara over here. And by the way, these three rabbis were the teachers of Rabbi Akiva. They were his teachers, which means Rabbi Akiva is the student of these other rabbis. And we see that he had this perspective that even the teachers didn't have. Continuing on, Shuv pa'amachat hayu olim l'Yerushalayim. So you think maybe it was a one-time event. No. The Gemara then tells another story. Once again, they were going to Yerushalayim, which means these four rabbis were walking together and they were going to Jerusalem. Obviously, this is after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, so they weren't going there to do korbanot, but maybe they were going there to pray. And from some people will learn a ra'ayah from here that you can pray on Har HaBayit as long as it's the right place and you prepared yourself properly. Anyway, I'm not going to get into politics over here. Kevan shigiu laharat sofim. What happened? As soon as they got to Harat Sufim, which is Mount Scopus, which if you go on Mount Scopus, you have a view of the entire Har HaBayit, the entire thing, because it's a high mountain, and that's where the Hebrew University campus is in Mount Scopus. If you go there, you can see the entire Har HaBayit. And when he came to Harat Sofim, Kar'u bigdehem, they tore their clothing. Why they tear their clothing? Because when a person sees the destruction of Yerushalayim and hasn't seen it within 30 days, there's a din in the Shulchan Aruch that says you're supposed to tear your clothing. This is a din that's a discussion whether or not it's applicable today or not. According to many poskim, it is. So if a person goes to see the kotel, what you have to do is you have to tear your shirt because you have to be mourning, just like a person tears their shirt for, God forbid, a parent who passes away or a first-degree relative. Similarly, it's a type of mourning. So they got to the Har HaBayit, okay? So as soon as they saw Harat Sofim that way, they tore their clothing. That's the halacha. Continuing on, Kevan Shigir LaHar HaBayit, they got to the Har HaBayit, which means that's when they saw it. Now they get to the Har HaBayit. Ra'u Shu'al, they saw a fox. Sheyatsa mi bet Kodshei HaKodashim. And this fox left the place of the Kodesh Kodashim. So clearly we'll see here that these rabbis knew where the Kodesh Kodashim was, which means they could potentially walk on Har HaBayit and they didn't have a problem because they knew where not to walk. People today obviously have to know where to walk. If a person goes on Har HaBayit and goes to places that he's not supposed to go, it's a big problem. It's correct. But continuing on, so he says over here that they saw a fox, which is an animal, a small animal coming out of the Holy of Holies, Bet Kodshei Kodashim. Hitchilu hen bochin. Those same three rabbis started to cry, which means they tore their clothing. That they all had to do. Now they see a fox coming out of the Holy of Holies and they start crying. Rabbi Akiva mitzahek. And Rabbi Akiva was happy. He was smiling. Amru lo, they said to him, Mi peneh ma ta mitzahek. Why are you happy? We're seeing a fox come out of the Kodesh Kodashim. We're seeing the destruction. Why are you happy? Amar lehen, mi peneh ma atem bochim. Same thing we saw before. So we see the Gemara is giving two stories like this to say what? This was Rabbi Akiva's attitude throughout his life. That any time he saw these tragedies, it's not that he was quiet or that he cried but didn't cry too much. He was happy. And what does he say over here? They ask him, why are you laughing? And he answers, why are you crying? Amru lo. And so now the rabbi is going to answer why they're crying. This is logical. Makom shekatuv bo, a place where it's written, that zar hakarev yumat. We learned from the parasha here in Bemidbar, but we also learn from our parasha today, Bezot Yavo Aharon al Kodesh, that only the Kohen Gadol, once a year, on the holiest day of the year, is allowed to go into the Kodesh Kodashim. That's when the Jewish people are doing the proper behavior, and the temple is there. When the temple's destroyed, okay? So it says over here, the Zara Karev Yumat, whoever is strange and comes close is going to die, is worthy of the death penalty. This is what happens if a person comes close and is not worthy or is not properly prepared. Perhaps this is a remez to one of the sin of Nadav and Avihu, but we'll get to that in a second. The Achshav, and now we're seeing Shualim Ilchubo. We're seeing foxes coming out of there, which means before only once a year could the Kohen Gadol there, and now we see a fox, an animal. This is crazy. V'lo nivkeh, we're not going to cry. So the rabbis, that's their logical answer for why they're crying. So Rabbi Akiva answers, Amar lehen. Precisely why you guys are crying, that's why I'm laughing. Because of the shual coming out of there. Meaning what? Dichtiv. He brings a pasuk from Yishaya, chapter 8, verse number 2, which talks about the Messianic age. Va'ida li edim ne'emanim. And I'm going to bring for myself proper witnesses. Et Uriah HaKohen, Uriah the Kohen, Vet Zechariah ben Yevarechehu, and Zechariah ben Yevarechehu, two individuals of stature at Tzadikim. V'chi ma inyan Uriah etzel Zechariah. Why is it putting the inyan of Uriah next to Zechariah? Uriah was in the first Bet HaMikdash, B'Mikdash Rishon, Zechariah B'Mikdash Sheni. And Zechariah is in the second temple, which means this pasuk is saying there's two witnesses. Rabbi Akiva says there's two witnesses. Which are the two witnesses? One witness is Uriah HaKohen, that's from the first Bet HaMikdash. And the next witness is Zechariah ben Yevarechehu, which is from the second Bet HaMikdash. And so what is the purpose of putting these two together? B'Mikdash Rishon Zechariah, B'Mikdash Sheni, Ela Tala Katuv Nevuato Shel Zechariah B'Nevuata Shel Uriah. Which means he's showing the prophecy of Zechariah, which was the last prophet of one of the last prophets that was living in the time of the second Bet HaMikdash. That's Zechariah. B'nivuato shel Uriah, which means the prophecy of Zechariah was tied to the prophecy of Uriah, and Uriah was during the first Beit HaMikdash. Continuing on, B'Uriah ketiv, in Uriah it's written, Lachen biglachem Tzion sadeh teherash. It says over here, because of you, this is from Micha, that because of you, Tzion, which is Mount Zion, will be like a plowed field. B'Zechariah ketiv, and what is written by Zechariah? Od yeshvu zekenim v'zkenot b'rechovot Yerushalayim. Shall sit in the future elderly men and elderly women in the streets of Jerusalem. Ad shelo nitkayema nevuato shel Uriah, until the prophecy of Uriah, which talked about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, which means it's going to be plowed. Ha'iti mityaresh shelo titkayem nevuato shel Zechariah. I was afraid that maybe the prophecy of Zechariah, if it didn't come, if the prophecy of Uriah doesn't come true, that the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed, then I can't rely that maybe the prophecy that the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built is not going to be the case. It's not going to happen. But now that the prophecy of Uriah was fulfilled, and this is how we know for sure that the nevuah of Zechariah is mitkayemet. And in this language, the rabbi said, Akiva nihamtanu, Akiva nihamtanu. Akiva, you have consoled us, you have consoled us. Which means Rabbi Akiva had a way of looking at things that is basically always on the positive. Which means he went through his life. Even in his death, we know how he died in a terrible way. His entire life he lived, everything that Hashem does is for the good. And we have to look for the good in all the things that happen. And even though it doesn't appear that good, like we see the rabbis here are saying, Rabbi Akiva basically was able to look at things with the proper perspective. And if you think about it, these rabbis should be familiar to all of us. And I heard this from a shiur from Rabbi Kamenetsky. I don't remember who he quoted, but it's a beautiful idea. In the Haggadah, it talks about people that were sitting in Bnei Brak. And it talks about these rabbis. And one of them is Rabbi Akiva. And it says who lived in Bnei Brak? Rabbi Akiva lived in Bnei Brak. The other rabbis didn't live in Bnei Brak. But what happened? These other rabbis, they left their families on Pesach, or Erev Pesach, obviously, and they went to spend time with Rabbi Akiva at his Seder. And they were sitting all night. Remember, those are the ones that were sitting all night until the students came, Higi Azman Kriyash Mashal Shakri. Why did the rabbis, the leaders of the generation, go to one of the students, one of the lower, so great rabbi in his time, but obviously at that particular time, these were greater rabbis. Why did they do that? Because Rabbi Akiva had a way of looking at things in a positive way. And that's really a tremendous way to go through life, to understand that everything, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, a person has to worship Hashem with simcha and not be sad. And even if there's tragedy, of course, a person has to mourn for people that are lost, and God forbid, it shouldn't happen, lo aleinu, lo alechem. But a person has to try to always find the silver lining in a tragedy, as we see the Talmud says over here. So we see these three approaches. The approach of Aharon, which is to be quiet, not to complain. The approach of Avraham Avinu, which is to cry, but not cry too much so it doesn't look like you're complaining. And then the approach of Rabbi Akiva. The approach of Rabbi Akiva is, no, this is bad now, but this is from Hashem, and we don't understand why. But maybe it's the opening of something that is better. It's something tremendous, and maybe things that we're going to get from here are going to be tremendous in the future. And this is Rabbi Akiva's entire attitude in life, and that's a very, very positive attitude. And this allows a person to continue to have a relationship with Hashem. Okay, have a good night, everybody. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen.